This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special five-part podcast series sponsored by Verint on the future of communication in financial compliance. My guest in this series is Phil Fry, Vice President, General Manager of Financial Compliance Strategy at Verint. Over this series, we will take a deep dive into the current status of communications in financial institutions, how to be or not to be compliant, an analysis and insight into the area, how to avoid accentuating the negative, and the human element in compliance. I know you'll enjoy this special five-part series. And now a word about our sponsor, Verint. For years, Verint Financial Compliance has led the way with market-leading solutions for communication capture and interactive data analysis to help financial firms prevent compliance issues proactively. Today, when digitalization, hybrid working, and the proliferation of communication channels all present companies with increasingly complex challenges, Verint again is pioneering AI-powered speech recognition, transcription, and communications profiling capabilities to tackle these difficulties. For more information or to book a demo, visit verint.com. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode in our five-part exploration of the future of communication in financial compliance. As always, joined by Phil Fry. Phil, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom.
Phil, we alluded to the changes that have occurred literally since the last time you and I had the chance to visit extensively, and those changes are still ongoing. And we went from the pandemic, where we had to work from home, to a new hybrid model of working, and the exponential use of communications that have changed everyone's lives. How has it affected Verint and other vendors in your space?
Tom, so 4 years ago, we literally just started recording Microsoft Teams calls and things like video conferences. But today, a compliance solution without the ability to capture Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and other UC tools is fundamentally a dead end. The way that people communicate and collaborate has shifted so much to digital interactions that it's become so centered around hybrid working models that UC platforms are now essentially the backbone of conducting business. The same applies, of course, to the financial markets. And as I mentioned before, the way that traders work now has evolved from this one-to-one conversations to conference calls and persistent interactions that may involve multiple people and last on and off for over a protracted time period. But equally, a solution must be able to capture data from the UC solutions and also the dealer boards and mobiles in a single solution to support the client needs. Now, all these new communications channels and modalities and the changes in employee needs and behavior obviously means new and more complex and prescriptive regulations. So one of our biggest focus areas has been about developing compliance capture for the UC tools and, of course, enhancing them with market-leading features that really go the extra mile to support businesses in their efforts to maintain compliance. At Verint, we've also been heavily investing in AI to enhance our features, and a big chunk of our new communications profiling and data insights offering is based on generative AI. Features like multi-language transcription and summarization. These features can do so much for financial firms that help them speed up and make audio review processes a lot more efficient.
So is the act of capturing a conversation becoming commoditized, or perhaps not?
Absolutely. But now, of course, it depends on what sort of rose-tinted glasses you're wearing. Now, if you bring it down to the most basic level, the capture of the communication of two people talking in a controlled environment like this, in the, as I would say, the King's English, yeah, pretty much anyone can do that now. But the real world definitely doesn't work that way. In reality, you'll have a trader in a very noisy environment trying to do a complex trade, speaking multiple languages, transferring the call mid-conversation. The call then gets moved onto a chat and finally onto a mobile phone. That is not easy. And if you add in the new data points like time and geography because of the hybrid working, the challenge of capture has become a whole lot more difficult. What I find really amusing is that no one acknowledged how difficult even the legacy capture was. It was harder than a lot of people considered, as suddenly you had a real-time environment included in standard bank technology processes that were set up or had fault tolerance for outages, but were also very structured. So without sophisticated capture, the issues relating to surveillance will remain as they are, continuing to miss lots of gaps in the data.
First of all, from the former colonies, shout out to King Charles and the King's English. First time you and I have ever been able to say that in our lifetimes. But I
True.
was struck by thinking about literally 30 years ago when traders would have their phone calls captured for recording. And I would, as a lawyer, would use that if there was a dispute about the trade. And you've taken us through a level of complexity that we could not have imagined literally 30 years ago. How, with that level of complexity, what are you, or perhaps more appropriately, Verint, doing to make everything compliant?
Like you, Tom, I've been around that 30 years, and you're right. It's changed dramatically. But we'll discuss it probably more in a bit more detail on maybe another podcast. But I want to give you a little bit of a teaser. We are basically approaching compliance in a drastically different way than we believe other compliance vendors out there are doing this. So what we're doing is we're shifting the focus from capturing tools or communications and modalities to capturing a regulated user's interactions holistically across channels and locations, whether it's their regular working hours or outside of it. We're focusing on the individual rather than the messages and the calls. And this is the only way you can truly make sure there's no misconduct within your organization, within that person's communications. We call this approach human compliance, and we firmly believe that it is the right and future way for communications in financial compliance.
Bill, in your last podcast, you referred to proactive compliance. Every compliance program is supposed to have three prongs: prevent, detect, and remediate. Yes, detection is critical, but if you've detected, it's already happened. How can we move to proactive compliance, or how is Verint helping counsel companies to move to proactive compliance?
Look, I've always, throughout my career, believed in prevention, or at least the very early diagnosis is critical. As you said, once it's happened, you're basically in a firefight. By implementing the human compliance approach, you basically have the means to monitor the entirety of a regulated user's communications across channels and services. Now, this lets you get more easily identifying the conditions in which acts of non-compliance are more likely to occur, and to respond to the incidents with automated tools rather than passively waiting for problems to be identified. So yes, I still firmly believe that the proactive way is absolutely critical. Now, to give you a specific example, in our Microsoft Teams compliance recording solution, you have features like conditional recording and stop-start recording, will let you automatically or manually control recording behavior based on the participation of the interaction. So this allows you to proactively decide which way that you're going to look at that person and the way that they interact.
Bill, you have been in this space, as you have articulated, quite some time, as have I. And I wanted to ask you about the message of proactive compliance that you just advocated for us. Is that a message that resonates with your customer base, or are many still thinking, oh, as long as I detect it, that's all I need?
I firmly believe so. And I think certainly with IT teams, when they get beaten up, I always say I spent 30 years getting beaten up by every senior trader, by every compliance officer when something did go wrong. And I feel if you haven't got the message, you're almost in the wrong job. Again, IT have to be proactive. The vendors supporting them have to be reactive. And I think that's been part of the problem. The vendors have literally said, here you go, here's a recorder, go away and capture, not thinking about what does that mean and how does that align into the wider framework, and how do they make the analysis of what they're doing proactive rather than capturing the call and then afterwards seeing what went wrong.
Unfortunately, we are near the end of our time. I hope our listeners will join us for our next episode when we take up the less provocative title, but equally interesting analysis and insights. But before we leave, if our listeners wanted any more information on Verint or the topics we've touched on today, what might be the best place for them to go?
The best place, Tom, is definitely the Verint website, verint.com. We have a very specialist area for the financial markets in there, talking to everything we do around the capture and the up and coming things like the analysis and insights.
Phil, thanks so much, and I greatly look forward to continuing our conversation.
Thanks, Tom.
This is Tom Fox again. I hope you will join us for our next episode of the Future in Communication in Financial Compliance. If you'd like more information on Verint, check out their website, verint.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review wherever great podcasts are listened to. This special 5-part podcast series is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.